Indoor BC football weather, plus the Jonas Brothers, plus the Toronto Argonauts, plus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers equals the 111th Grey Cup. And who better to talk about the Grey Cup with the Argos in it than a Ticats correspondent? That is Rick Zamperin, who's over to my side. Rick, how are we doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. You know what? It's a bit of a rainy Thursday here in southwestern Ontario, but only so much you can do about that. But when it's Grey Cup week, nothing will dampen the spirits.
Well, we know one thing for sure on Grey Cup Sunday. The weather is going to be outstanding, at least inside the stadium. I'm not sure what's happening outside. I know they've had a little bit of rain in Vancouver, and that's dampened the parade for the Grey Cup Festival. But otherwise, we're going to be treated to a phenomenal game, I think, between the Bombers and the Argos.
Same. And the one thing I did see from Derek Taylor last night, Bombers radio host, is that apparently in the media welcome kit, they included an umbrella, which I found was like a little fun little tidbit especially for Vancouver.
Good call. Good call.
Yeah, which I got. I actually, it's right here. The hat from last year that we got. The fun.
Oh, nice. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But before we talk about the Grey Cup, I want to delve into the Ticats just because I feel like this year, I don't know if hope was the right word, but there was a lot of optimism and just a sense of like, is this going to be the year, considering this was year 25 since their last Grey Cup win? It didn't happen. So what's the real perspective you found on Tiger Town throughout just since the season has ended and what they're looking forward to next year?
Well, I think certainly 2024 was a disappointing campaign. But when you look at the reasons why, you kind of put the pieces together and say, okay, that's why it happened. You know, offensively, this team was one of the highest ranked in terms of yards and points and first downs and red zone and all that kind of stuff. Defensively, though, and I kind of made mention of this at the start of the season because there were so many new moving parts to this defense, is that, you know, what is the expectation? Is it going to take half the season for the defense to kind of gel and find their way and then start clicking? Is it going to be about a month? You know, what is the prognosis? And at the end of the day, it basically took a half a year. You know, this team was 2-9 going into the Labor Day Classic. The defense struggled mightily, especially in the first, month of the year, as, either guys got hurt or they weren't working out, or, defensive coordinator at the time, Mark Washington, was trying to, flip the script in terms of inserting players he thought could make a difference at certain, position groups. And whatever he tried did not work. And, the same for special teams. The return game pretty much for the entire year was non-existent. They had one punt return for a touchdown. Janarian Grant himself had four with punt and kickoff returns. Their coverage unit on special teams was horrible. So aside from the offense clicking from day one and all season long, it took too long for the defense and the special teams to get going. Going into the offseason, I think one of the keys to building a winner in 2025 in Hamilton will be continuity. Don't make too many changes. And if you do, make sure the changes that you do make are effective, whether you're bringing in free agents or it's through the draft. If you hit a home run there, the guys that they bring in to supplant the players that did not work out this year, they're going to have to be better. And that's going to be the big goal going into this offseason.
Yeah, exactly. Like a couple of the guys they brought in, one that I was really impressed with because I missed him with the Argonauts is obviously Jamal Peters in the secondary. There's also just some other pieces. I feel like though it's just more or less the cohesion is, and then the fact too that like from what I saw, because like I wasn't at Labor Day, but I was at the game in July, and I knew you guys were coming off the very bad loss to BC, and then it was just that like renowned sense of like, hey, 1 week they beat Toronto, it was great for a great jolt for the fan base. But then it's like the roller coaster effect where then they had the couple of bad games with Montreal, the game where Edmonton came into Hamilton, and just completely wiped the floor. I think it's just more about consistency in 2025. And this is coming from an Argos fan because in the East next year, look, Toronto, Montreal, I don't think are going anywhere. I think Ryan Didwin runs a great ship in Toronto. There's a lot of continuity with the Argonauts. Montreal, there's some question marks just because we don't know exactly what the future long-term holds, especially considering look at what Ottawa, we'll talk about them in a sec, what Montreal did, where it's like, hey, they didn't have the 16-2 year, but they pretty much dominated from from week one till when they clinched the East. And then obviously, I don't even say the playoffs, they really faltered. I think it was just they picked a bad day to have a bad game. And then the big question with the East, though, is that Ottawa Red Blacks team is because we've seen this before, not so much in the NFL, but more in the CFL, but the NFL, where a team makes the playoffs, they get complacent. And that's somewhere where I think if Ottawa either gets complacent or there's not a lot of improvements, that's where Hamilton can really strike in and get themselves back into the playoff picture to hopefully be, and let's be honest, a much colder Grey Cup next year.
Yes, definitely. I think, the two teams that you referenced, because I think Toronto, year in and year out, over the last number of years, has been very consistent and fielding a proven winner. Montreal has kind of been a little up and down over the last number of years, but, last year they went on a tremendous run, got hot at the right time. Cody Fajardo was amazing. His weapons all around them were
Yes.
healthy and effective, explosive. The defense was unbelievable. Special teams was great. They have a big decision to make at the quarterback position. Are they going to keep Fajardo, who has been injury riddled in the past, including this season, or is Davis Alexander their guy? I think it's going to be the former as opposed to the latter, and I'm not sure where Alexander is going to go. And as for Ottawa, at one point I think they were 7-3-1 or 8-3-1, something ridiculous like that, and they went on a long losing streak. Guys were getting hurt, things were not working out offensively and defensively. And while I think they have some pretty good pieces in place and some good tools for Drew Brown to work with going forward, I think that they have to maintain some consistency and continuity as well in the offseason. They have a good foundation finally that they can build towards and build maybe a team that contend for the division title, but they can't have these slip ups. And if they're not going to improve via free agency, they're going to have to hope the guys that they do retain, equal what they did this year next year. That's a big ask for some players.
That's the big question with Ottawa for me is how many players are going to stay committed, because there's a lot of players that went there kind of on not prove it deals, but more or less like, hey, they want to reset the culture that did that. But then now it's those players, hey, if they get offers from teams who, are kind of, I don't even want to say locked and loaded, because in the CFL, it's such a year by year league. It's not like, the NFL where you pretty much know going into the year who the teams in January are going to be. With the CFL, it's true. The real football doesn't start till Labor Day, and we've seen that the last couple of years with Toronto and Montreal. Now, even Winnipeg this year, Winnipeg wasn't the same dominant team they've been the last 4 years. So, just going back to Ottawa now, it's just, hey, can you get those same guys to buy in again? Can you get those guys to buy in and play in a stadium where, I don't know about you, but it always seems to rain on their game days in Ottawa. I don't know what it is. It's a case. It's just something I've noticed. But then you can then sell on, hey, Toronto's calling, Saskatchewan's calling, BC, Winnipeg, Hamilton, because that's the other thing too now with Hamilton. It's not so much of a culture thing, but it's that whole, do you want to be a part of history? Because if you win a Grey Cup in Hamilton, especially now, those fans are never, ever going to forget it. We've seen it this year with the amount of Grey Cup teams that were honoring the 99 teams. I believe there were some other teams in there in the mix as well. But you play a key part in bringing Steel Town a Grey Cup. Fans aren't going to let you forget it, because, look, they are very, very, very passionate with a V and a P.
Absolutely. I mean, and the 99 Ticats team, the last team to do it, is still revered. I mean, they had their 25th anniversary, this season. They, were a very special team. They came up short the year before in '98 against Calgary, the rematch. They finally got the job done and brought the cup back to Hamilton. But for the Tiger Cats, in whatever year it's going to happen, and I'm sure, in a 9-team league, it's going to happen relatively soon, you would think.
Yeah.
They're going to have to get some big time improvements on defense, and they're going to have to find a return guy, because over the last 2 to 3 years, the return game has been virtually non-existent. This team has been blessed with unbelievable return guys, from Speedy B, who you guys know in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Williams, Marcus Thigpen, even Frankie Williams before he got hurt. Amazing return guys who can break a game open. This year with Lawrence Woods and, a bunch of the other guys that they tried just did not work. Tyreek McAllister was pretty good last year, but again, went down to the NFL. He's now applying his trade down there, making some big bucks. But that is one piece to the puzzle. Apart from improving the defense and drastically, they have to find a return guy in 2025.
Yeah, because that's the big thing with the CFL too, and that's the thing I keep saying. We'll talk about the Grey Cup in a second, but it's truly a 3-phase league. Where you can't just have, because we've seen this with Toronto even last year in their 16-2 year, where it's like, hey, if there's a night the offense isn't clicking, the defense is going to bail you out. It's a night where both aren't. You're in a shootout. Last year they had the case too against Calgary, where Javon Leake had a punt return late in the game to really seal it for them. Even this year too, Janarian Grant, who's been amazing for Toronto. It's just wonderful to see how they gone from literally League going to Edmonton to then bringing in Janarian Grant, who's kind of an outcast, not an outcast, but so much he left Winnipeg, to where it's, hey, just a turnover. That's why I believe in Toronto, because they have the right coaches in place to where until something happens, I still believe in them. But with Hamilton, I have one more question for you before we flip to the Grey Cup, and that is, quarterback for next year. What goes on with Bo? What goes on with Talia? Because we saw some pretty cool moments from him this year. Had the great season of Maryland, where ironically Coach Milanovic also played. And then now it's kind of that, is he ready to establish his footprint in the league, or do you think they're still going to ride with the hot hand who's up for MOP tonight?
I would say Mitchell's the guy, the de facto guy going into next year. I mean, here's a guy who, started out pretty strong, had too many turnovers like he did last year, got benched. Taylor Powell in that game in which he's starting for the first time in a long time gets hurt. Bo is reinserted as the starter and was probably arguably the best quarterback going, down the stretch the last 6 or 7 games of the season. He was unbelievable. But can he do it again? And he's certainly on the wrong side of 30. He's going to be 35 when training camp opens next year. Can he replicate what he did this year next year? If he has the pieces in place at the receiver position, Tim White, we know, is going to be back. Is Stephen Dunbar going to be back? Is Shamar Bridges going to be as effective as he was this past season? Are they going to re-sign Keandre Smith, who, as a Canadian receiver, can command some pretty big coin with a bunch of teams? Is the running back Greg Bell, is he the real deal? Can he be one of those game-breaking guys like we see with Kadeem Carey and Brady Oliveira and, Walter Fletcher in Montreal? Those questions will have to be answered as well. But if you're looking at the quarterback position, I think the hierarchy right now is Mitchell number 1, Powell 2, Tagovailoa is 3rd. We don't quite know the ceiling that Talia has. We don't quite know the ceiling that Taylor Powell has either. As a rookie, Powell was thrust into the equation because both Mitchell and Matthew Schultz got hurt. So Powell's in here. He came into training camp 9 days after camp began last year, and suddenly he's the starting quarterback and started, a bunch of games and, did pretty well for a rookie quarterback where, things are going a mile a minute. He handled himself quite admirably. But how good can he be, and how consistently good can he be? We still don't know that. And we also have no idea if Talia can ever reach, the status that, the best quarterbacks in this league have reached. I think the sky's the limit, but we're going to have to see him a lot more, not only in training camp and in the preseason, but the regular season as well.
I only skipped over Taylor just because I know Talia has a lot of potential, and he's a very young, raw prospect coming up from the States. Obviously, we know folks out there don't know who his brother is. I think you can kind of figure it out. But I think this year, honestly, then you know what? You have Bo State be the number 1, but then you have that battle for backup, which honestly, a lot of people I know, it's like, oh, this, if you truly want a successful football team, you need that. Because if you look at the Grey Cup now, look, Chad Kelly's leg went one way. It just wasn't supposed to go. Fractured ankle, out for, it's weird. I've heard 4 to 6 months. I've heard 6 to 9 months. Honestly, I think at this point, we're probably not going to have a clear answer until 2025, probably sometime in the winter. But with that, though, we got the Grey Cup. Toronto, Winnipeg. This honestly is a very compelling battle because I think, and it's not, I know the betting lines are showing minus 10.5, and I have people asking me, why is it so high? I don't see a David versus Goliath matchup. I don't see, anything that's happened. I look at one team who can pull off a hell of a story, and I look at one team where you're either going to be remembered for the right reasons or you're going to be remembered for the wrong seasons. And by the way, the first one is Toronto. The remembered for right and wrong is Winnipeg.
You're exactly right. I mean, if Toronto goes into this game, and you mentioned it, 10.5-point favorites for Winnipeg, some books have 8.5, some have 9.5, whatever the case is, it's close to double digits.
Yes.
And it's because Chad Kelly's not on the football field. If he were playing, I'd probably suspect Winnipeg would be maybe a 2.5-point favorite, but odds makers be what they are. If Toronto goes into this game and Nick Arbuckle manages the game, does not, throw any interceptions, doesn't fumble the ball away, has a nice and tidy game, is 20 of 25 for, 225 yards, a couple of touchdowns, no turnovers, they have a great shot to win. Why? Because Toronto's defense has been playing exceptionally well. They can get to the quarterback. They can disrupt pass patterns. They can, block passes at the line of scrimmage. They have a number of all-star type players who can make big plays at big times. And special teams wise, Toronto's right up there with Winnipeg as well. Haralahu is unbelievably consistent. Grant's the best return guy in the league, hands down. From a punting perspective, Haggerty can boom it anywhere you want him to place it. Toronto's a well-oiled machine. The one question mark is, can Arbuckle, who, let's not forget, has a week to prepare for this game and knows the playbook by the back of his hand, if he can get the job done on Sunday, this Argos team has a better than a good chance to win. The other part of the equation that you mentioned is Winnipeg. If they lose this game, that's 3 Grey Cup losses in 5 straight years. That is not a legacy that you're going to want to carry around with you. Now, if they win, yeah, you've won 3 of 5. Now all of a sudden it's, back to dynasty talk, which deservedly so would, fit the bill. You win 3 Grey Cups in 5 years and you've been to 5 in a row, you earn that talk. I think more the pressure is on Winnipeg, given that they've lost the last 2, and if they lose again, a lot of that chatter is going to happen. Let's not forget too, Toronto has won both of their games against Winnipeg this season, 14-11 and 16-14 in overtime. 2 hard-fought, low-scoring, defensive slobber knockers. It could be another one like this on Sunday. Who knows?
Yeah, so that's the one thing too with the game. It can go either way. Last year I thought the under was going to hit, the over hit, but then I remember from the last 2 Grey Cups with talking to people from Winnipeg, which to just take a minute, just send our best to the family of Ted Wyman. Very, very unfortunate sad incident in Winnipeg. But I remember 2 years ago, like we were being told this after the Grey Cup, where 2 years ago it was surprise shock that they lost. Last year, so where I was last year, I wasn't in the press box at Tim Hortons Field, but I was down in that workroom where the press conferences were.
Mhm.
And that was right across the hall from where Winnipeg's room was. And there was a lot of words said. There was a lot of it was a very negative environment.
Yeah.
And I think that's why, honestly, this is such a hard Grey Cup to pick. Like last year, like 2 years ago, I was on Toronto just because I was like, why not? And then last year, being around the coaching staff with Montreal and like the players, I was just like, there's something about a hot team at the right time. But this one, honestly, this is a coin flip football game to where, going back to my original point about Winnipeg, they remember what it feels like to be here and to lose. The fun fact of Toronto, too, is I believe they haven't lost a Grey Cup since 1987, which ironically was also a BC place. But that being said, I can even throw a casino metaphor in here. Winnipeg's down to their last $10 chip. Toronto's playing with house money. Because I think if the narrative would be if the Argos lose, it's going to be we didn't have Kelly. Arbuckle did what he could, but it wasn't enough.
Right.
You lose with Winnipeg, that's 3 in a row to where I always say this too, it's not last ride, but it feels like the future's bleak in the sense of you don't know what to expect for 2025, especially too with Saskatchewan being back to a good team. BC, good, but BC's like Montreal, where there's good, but there's question marks. And then the Alberta teams are they're big waits and sees. So we'll have to see what goes on there. But ultimately for Winnipeg, it's going to come down to both teams have to play careful football in the sense of turnovers can kill you, but then at the same time too, they'll help and kill you, but then it's just who ultimately makes that one little mistake. It's that one little error that has something off center to where it's costing your name at being on the trophy.
Absolutely. And every little mistake can turn into a huge mistake. And if it's a turnover or a missed opportunity in the red zone, you might not get, you might not get that chance again. The way I look at this game, I'm picking Winnipeg to win, but I think the Argos cover the number, whether it's 9.5 or 10.5. I don't think this is going to be a blow by any stretch of the imagination, unless, there's a late touchdown scored or the Argos really, they get turnover happy and Winnipeg takes advantage. But I think they're 2 evenly matched teams. I think Winnipeg's defense is really good. Their offense is, can be magical if Oliveira gets going. And, Dembski's healthy enough to play. I noticed he didn't practice on Wednesday. So that might be a question mark again going into this Grey Cup. But Zach Collaros, he's clutch. We saw it in the 2 games that he played against Hamilton. One was a blowout. The other one was, a last-minute victory. They can beat you so many different ways. Willie Jefferson, the guy is timeless. He can make big plays, knock down passes, get to the quarterback. They got a good linebacking core, even without Adam Bighill, and their secondary is really good as well, highlighted by Terrell Ford. Winnipeg's going to be a tough nut to crack. I think this is going to be a great game.
It is, honestly. One place where I think this game's truly going to be won is offensive line play. I know it's a very overlooked part of football by a lot of people, but last year we saw what Montreal was able to do with it against the Winnipeg defense. They basically neutralized them for most of the game, where Cody Fajardo had a lot of time to make plays. We saw him have the one catch to Austin Mack that was unbelievable, the touchdown to Philpott where Philpott just ran the right route, and then the Cole Speaker third down catch, to where I look for Toronto, for either team, who's going to step up and be that. Will it be Coxie? Will it be Daniels? Will it be Kenny Lawler, who balled out in the West Final last week? Will it be Dembski if he's healthy? Or let's not forget, Oliveira and Carey can literally, I've been using this a lot this season, but one of them could truly carry their team to victory on their back.
Absolutely. You mentioned the offensive line play, and that's, one thing that few fans talk about, but there's a man much smarter than me who told me years ago that your offense is only as good as your offensive line.
Yeah.
And if your offensive line can keep the quarterback clean, that gives you options. Whether you're going to check down to your running back or you're going to hit the hot route, or you can go through your progression and make the right play at the right time. If your offensive line is on point, the quarterback has time. There's no happy feet, no time to panic, no pressure in his face, and he can make the play that needs to be made. So the team that gets the better offensive line play on Sunday is probably going to win the game.
Yep, exactly. That's the thing. Because look, you have dogs on both sides of the defensive lines as well. Like, look, if you look at Toronto's Florin or Malade, Jake Ceresna had an amazing year. Wynton McManus, just an anchor of the defense. And then you, like you said, Willie Jefferson too with Winnipeg, to where, look, either one of those names I just mentioned, if they have a day, that means you're in trouble because, and this is opening up a wound for you. But 2019, look at what happened to Dane Evans. Willie Jefferson just was like, nope, I'm taking this game over. I'm commanding this game. And then that led Dane into some very uncomfortable situations, which ultimately led Winnipeg not, I don't want to say dynasty, but kickstarting this run that they've been on. Like, both, and here's the other thing too with this game. Both coaches are going to have their teams ready to go. That Mike O'Shea, Ryan Dinwiddie, we saw it in the press conference. Those were two guys who did not want to be there. They wanted to be game planning. They wanted to be, in their hotel rooms, in the bowels of BC Place, just getting ready for Sunday night. And there's just, honestly, like you said, so I think Toronto pulls it out just because Dinwiddie relishes the underdog role. And it's just this whole mantra of it's us against the world. It's the no one believes in us. But at the same time, too, if Toronto wins, it's not this. It's going to suck, obviously, losing a championship game, no matter what sport you play, how old you are. It's not fun. No matter if you wear the pads, you focus on the teams like you or I. It sucks, but they know that they can hold their heads up high saying, look what we did, considering what they went throughout the offseason, losing a bunch of guys to free agency, losing Kelly to the suspension. And then throughout training camp, it was just business as usual. There were some ups and downs, but in football, for as much as an underdog mentality is great to have, there's also nothing more. I know I said earlier, nothing more dangerous than a team who is on a hot run. There's also nothing more dangerous than a team with nothing to lose.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So are you picking the Argos to win?
You know what? I'm doing it, honestly. And because here's the other reason why. The last two Grey Cups, where Winnipeg lost, Winnipeg was the betting favorite by a lot. Toronto was plus 180 2 years ago. Montreal was plus 300 last year to win the game. So if you want to make a little bit of coin, I'm being optimistic. Like, it's one of those things where I could see it going either way. Like, if Winnipeg wins, I wouldn't be shocked. But at the end of the day, I just know Ryan will have the guys locked and loaded. I know he'll have the guys prepared. And I just think it's a grind them out close football game. I think he's going to have Nick Arbuckle, let's call it death by 1,000 cuts. Just simple dink and dunk. Something that, I'll be honest with you, killed Toronto a lot in the when Chad Kelly was suspended. We saw him in the game against Montreal week 4. If you go back and watch that film, it was just, they're going to throw the ball. You're not going to be able to stop it. But ultimately, I think there's one key play on defense or special teams that wins the game. It's like, I'm not saying it's to the level of Super Bowl 49, but, there's that little Zach Collaros throws a bomb, and like, a player to watch for in this game, honestly, is Deshaun Amos and Tavares McFadden, who have been ball hawks the last couple months of the year. Something like that happening where it's just the player that Zach needs a game-winning drive, and just something happens with the ball and it lands in the hands of a double blue DB.
Yeah, we've seen, especially in the Grey Cup, so many underdogs win the game. And, it's a one-game scenario. So many things happen in the game. Again, this Sunday, the weather will not be a factor. So that's going to lead to ideal conditions. But mistakes will still be made, whether it's a turnover or not executing a play, hitting the upright on a field goal attempt. Yeah, exactly. Bad penalty at a bad time, whatever the case is, strange things happen in every CFL game, and then they're magnified in the Grey Cup. And if you can't recover from that mistake or that, ill-advised pass, or you can't convert the second and 5, whatever the case is, at a certain part of the game, that not only comes back to haunt you, but will reflect in the final score. So there's so many different things that can happen in this game. The one thing that I'm really intrigued by is how do these two teams start out? Are we
Yes.
going to see a big time pass or run from either of these teams? Are they going to try to go deep? Are they going to try to expose, the other weaknesses right off the get-go? Is it going to be a trick play? The start of each game is so intriguing after the opening kickoff that I'm really amped to see how these two head coaching staffs and offensive and defensive coordinators kind of manage the start of the game.
Yeah, that's a big thing too. I think if I had to predict, I think it's Winnipeg that tries to go for the
Yeah.
kill shot first, just because I get like, if Winnipeg starts with the ball, look what they did last Saturday against Saskatchewan right away with Kenny Lawler. Just
Hmm.
I thought for sure there was a chance that not that I didn't have Saskatchewan to win, but I thought for sure they'd cover the 3.5. I didn't think the game was going to be as bad
Yeah.
as it was, but I think that there's something like that where you try to capitalize on that early because from a defensive perspective, we know Dinwiddie and here's the other thing too, Toronto unsung hero, quarterbacks coach Mike Miller, who look all the quarterbacks and even it's so funny with Toronto that they're starting the season with the three quarterbacks that they are ending the season, with the three quarterbacks they started with Arbuckle, Dukes, and Scott. But I think with Toronto, it's just going to be those surgical precision drives to open the game. If they start with the ball, to, just go and get points on the board. But I honestly wouldn't be shocked to see if they're close to the red zone or if they're in the red zone to see Ryan Dinwiddie pull a little Dan Campbell magic and go for it on third down. And I know for a lot of my American people, they're being, what are you talking about? They're three down football is a thing, people. To where
Yes.
sometimes I'm watching NFL now and I'm like, second down, they got to convert it. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, they have two more tries. But, I can see them doing that where it's that kind of kill shot, where it's that you think you have them down and out. You think, oh, we're settling for a field goal. No, Toronto runs a play, extends the drive further.
I'm of two mindsets when it comes to the Argos starting drive in particular. That one, do they want to get Nick Arbuckle comfortable and give him a couple of easy throws, a crossing route that Tavares Daniels runs, or maybe a quick out to Kadeem Carey in the flat, just get him that first completion? Or do you say, hey, we're going to go deep to Mackay Polk here, and we're going to show you, Winnipeg, that we're not afraid to throw the football down the field? I think that's really intriguing. And, the Winnipeg scenario that you laid out, I can see wholeheartedly Zach on the first play of the game going deep to a Lawler, or, if Dembski is healthy, try to hit him on a big play to also say, Toronto, we're in this to win it. We don't want to lose a third Grey Cup. We're here to win. So yeah, that first drive for both teams, I think, is going to be really intriguing.
It's just intriguing too, just from the perspective of like it's the tone setter for the game. But then you got to remember this isn't your typical football game. It's you really think about it with all assets of coaching this game. There's not a single coach where you look at like, oh, who's better than the other. Like O'Shea and Pierce. You have Dinwiddie, the two DCs in Toronto, Mickey Donovan, special teams coach with Toronto. That it's I don't even want to throw it out there because, like, look, everything that's happened up till now, it's nothing else matters. Here's the thing you've done for the last 23 weeks, you can put it all aside
Mm-hmm.
because Toronto, yes and no, you will remember the season, but for Winnipeg, they lose this game. Look, you won first place in the division again. You host another West final. You lost three Grey Cups in a row. That hanging over the head, I don't think it's going to be a big factor. I truly don't. But at the same time, too, if they go down, like say if at halftime Toronto's up like 14 to 10, 14 to 6. Let's say even 5 for fun. 5. There's sprinkling a rouge or two. But how does that affect Winnipeg? What's the mentality in that locker room? Because then it's basically we know how Toronto's able to bounce back. We know what the leadership's capable of. It's more or less just how would Winnipeg face adversity compared to Toronto?
Well, I think they would probably face it fairly well because you got to think, in game, you're not thinking about, at least I don't think they're thinking about the legacy of the team unless, there's a minute to go and it's crunch time and they're either up or down and they're thinking, boy, if we make this play, we're going to either win 3 Grey Cups or we're going to lose 3 Grey Cups. But, by halftime or the third quarter, I think they're hyper focused on the next play, the next series, whatever the case is. But when you get into the dying seconds of the game, I think that's when they're allowing themselves to think about all the other noise that kind of goes on with the Grey Cup. And certainly if they're thinking about legacy at the opening kickoff, they're probably not going to perform well in the
No.
game because they have things to do. They have assignments to, adhere to. They have routes to run, whatever the case is. So yeah, if they're thinking about that stuff, they're in for a long day.
I only say that just because with obviously like it's probably about a 25-minute halftime because you have the panel talk.
Right.
You have the Jonas Brothers go on for about 10 to 15 minutes, if I had to guess. which I think I already know what the first song is going to be, but that's just because it's been used in all the promos since June, excuse me. But that's why I look at it, where it's when you're sitting in halftime, who makes the proper adjustments?
Yeah.
Who, hey, we do this, instead do this. What does it come down to? And also, here's the other thing too, at halftime, if you're up, you can't get too not I'm not saying the teams are going to declare victory, but like I could the one negative with Toronto is I could see a world where if they're up, they get complacent and then they have a couple plays where it's like a 2 and out or an errant ball by Arbuckle lands in the hands of a Winnipeg player. It's just one of those things where that I worry about. But then with Winnipeg at the same time too, it's kind of like they're up by 10 or 14 points at halftime. You got to remember Toronto will capitalize on any turning points in the game. Look at and I'll say this too. You have to look to the East Final for this because Ottawa basically had a game plan. They also didn't have a running back, but that's another story. Where look, they tied it up at halftime, and then after that, they scored 35 unanswered points en route to the East Final. So that's the kind of battles and nuances I'm going to be watching for Sunday night.
Yeah, it'll be interesting if this team. I'm talking about the Argos. If this team is ahead at halftime, I think Ryan Dinwiddie, and he's shown this in previous games, whether it's Grey Cups or East Finals or whatever the case is, I think he does a good job in keeping his team motivated, or at least have their eye on the prize to say, listen, the job's not done yet. Yeah, we had a good couple of quarters, but there's 2 more quarters to go. We have to play like we did in the first half, and I think the same can be said for Mike O'Shea, whether they're up or down. I think there's enough veteran leadership in both locker rooms that they're going to tell themselves, listen, we're not out of this, or yeah, we got to keep putting the pedal to the metal. I think there's so many amazing, talented and veteran guys on both teams that they're not going to get too up or down during the game, whether it's halftime or in between quarters, but it's going to be fun to watch for sure.
So I want to do a little exercise with you. Obviously I have Toronto, you have Winnipeg, but if you had to pick an MOP for either side for the game.
So I'll start with,
but I feel like this one's more exciting, where it's just who's that true difference maker.
Yeah, I think if the Argos are going to win, certainly Arbuckle is going to have to play well. But I think even more so, Kadeem Carey is going to have to play really well, because if you have a balanced offensive attack, Winnipeg can't pin their ears back to go after Arbuckle. If Kadeem Carey's getting his yards, first downs, maybe a touchdown or two, they're going to have to really look at that situation to say, are they going to run on this play, or are they going to continue to pass? I think if Carey is, 15 to 20 carries, 80 to 110 yards, a touchdown or two, that's a great stat line. And I think that could be probably enough to win Grey Cup Most Outstanding Player if Toronto wins. If Winnipeg wins, I think it begins and ends with Zach Collaros. Yeah, Brady Oliveira is probably going to win Most Outstanding Player Thursday night, but if Zach Collaros can find guys like Lawler and Dembski and all the other weapons he has, maybe even checks down to Oliveira for some big first downs, I think Zach Collaros, who's won this award before, is probably going to be the favorite going in. I think he is obviously the betting favorite going in when it comes to Most Outstanding Player. If Collaros plays exceptionally well, he's hands down going to be the guy for Winnipeg.
So I'm going to look it up on FanDuel quickly. I do this a lot here on the show, where it's like a lot of just sudden, not sudden predictions, but like sudden, just like I got to look this up on the spot. Just me doing my research. But I just wanted to pull up the overall odds for MOP for the game, or MVP. So Zach Collaros is plus 195, but if you want some value, Kadeem Carey on FanDuel is at plus 1100.
There you go.
So, and the next, literally the only Argos on here are with significant odds is there. Even if you want another one, plus 3,700, Winton McManus.
Wow.
Just throwing that out. Just saw that. So I'm like, wow, look at that. I completely agree with you that I think if Winnipeg wins, for as much as Brady wins, and we all know, not all know, but I'll assume he's going to win CFL MOP, which I want to talk to you about that before we wrap up. I truly think that this is a legacy game for Zach Collaros more than anything, because we know how old he is. We now know his top 5 Greek foods, which I really like that segment. I know that is one thing I'll say about Hamilton. That is a player I really like on and off the field.
Stavros Katsantonis.
Yes, Stavros. Yeah. He brings the energy on the field. He makes the plays, and off the field, he's just like a fun, goofy guy, like what you want in a football player. But with this game, like I said too, with Zach, if he wins this game, it defines him who he is as a player. Look, obviously, I don't know what how many retired jerseys there are in Winnipeg, but number 8 would definitely get remembered in a very solid way if you win 3 Grey Cups in 5 years. I think you put the dynasty label on because that's been my thing always is you have to win 3 to get to the dynasty. That's why, like, look, we see what's going on in the States is a little different. We can also touch on that if we want, but with Zach, like this is a legacy game for him because either you're going to be remembered as the quarterback who won a football crazed town 3 Grey Cups, or you're going to be the quarterback that's remembered for losing 3 Grey Cups. Meanwhile, Toronto, for as much as I want to go Arbuckle, I think someone's got to step up, and that's why I would go with Kadeem Carey to win MVP for the game. I think if he wins, dad joke of the season for me, he carries them to victory.
Yes,
We've said
absolutely.
that that's been a press box thing at BMO Field since June.
Yeah. And for anyone who missed the Stavros Katsantonis bit, so he and Zach Collaros, two, proud Greeks, were talking about the top 5 Greek foods, and Zach unveiled his top 5, and Stavros agreed with some and disagreed with some others. It's a good bit.
I just love how he's just like right away, like, no, not for me. No, no.
Yeah.
But with MOP, look, you have Bo Levi Mitchell, you have Brady Oliveira. My take has just been whose play got his team to the playoffs. I'm not discrediting Bo. I view it the same way with baseball. Like there was all those years where it's like Mike Trout was winning MVP, and I'm not trying to discredit
Right.
Trout, but there's that whole asterisk of you didn't make it in. I think if there was a world where Hamilton got, like, say if that last game of the regular season was Hamilton Ottawa, Hamilton wins, they go to the playoffs, even if they lose to Toronto in the East Semi. I think that's Bo's award because he carried his team to the playoffs. But I think it's just he basically got hot at not the wrong time, but I think it was just too little, too late. Meanwhile, with Brady, for as much as Winnipeg struggled with the 0-4 start, with everything else, when it was time to put on the cape, the man who wears number 20 did that, and there's a reason why Winnipeg's been to 5 straight Grey Cups, and it's partially due to the play of Brady. Meanwhile, with Bo, it's like I said earlier, I think I think you have to mix in the benching too. The fact that like he was benched, but then he was brought back, but why he was brought back was because of happening with Powell getting hurt. That's my 2 cents on it. I wanted to hear from a true Ticats person on it.
Yeah. So the way I voted, and I do have a vote, so I balanced my vote on a couple of things, and maybe we'll start with Brady Oliveira. And I looked at his season, and while he had a fantastic year, again over 1,000 yards, led the league in that category. You look at his yardage this year, and I think it was just over 1,300. Last year he was over 1,500. Last year he had 9 touchdowns. This year he had 3 touchdowns. Clearly one of the leaders of this, fantastic organization in Winnipeg. But Winnipeg, and now I'm comparing Winnipeg as a team to Hamilton as a team, because this isn't a team award.
No.
This is most outstanding player. And so I interpret that as the best player in the league. And so while Oliveira led the league in rushing yards, he was nowhere close to leading in rushing touchdowns. And primarily that's now a quarterback stat with all these goal line stands that the quarterback gets into the end zone. But his numbers this year were worse than his numbers last year. And he didn't win the award last year either. And a lot of people thought that he may have deserved to win the award over Chad Kelly. And so for Bo Levi Mitchell, here's a guy who broke the franchise record and Hamilton's record for passing yards in a year, was over 1,100 yards, more passing yards than Zach Collaros, who was in second place, had 32 touchdowns, which I think were 6 or 8 more than McLeod Bethel Thompson in Edmonton, and was a guy who played all 18 games. Yeah, he got benched for that one game, and unfortunately Powell gets hurt. But Bo wasn't the problem in Hamilton. If they had an average defense, even in the first couple of months, they're probably in the playoffs. And, he's probably the slam dunk winner for MOP. But what changed on his part? The wins and losses. Again, that is a team statistic. And so when I cast my vote, I thought, Oliveira is probably going to win. But in my heart of hearts, the most outstanding player this year, not only statistically, but carried the offense in Hamilton on his shoulders, was Bo Levi Mitchell. So again, I don't think he's going to win the award, but I thought from my standpoint and the standards that I was looking at and the stats that I was looking at as well, I gave him the edge over Brady Oliveira.
You know what? Honestly, I don't want to say change my opinion, but it's just like because I just have that playoff thing over it. That's just a personal thing. That's nothing to do with the player. He had a fantastic season. He brought in a fantastic fashion trend too, if I might add. But
Yeah.
We're having fun here. But just the overall body of work from him is what I think Ticat fans can hang on to where it's like 2025. Not that they can come in and say it's our year, but you have that sense of just optimism that they can turn it around. It's, if the defense, hell, you guys beat Saskatchewan one of those first two games of the year. I know they obviously
Yeah.
lost to Calgary, but you don't get swept by Saskatchewan in that back-to-back where there was a lot of close things down. You guys have a hell of a, no pun intended, a hell of a leg on a kicker as well.
Hmm.
But it's just all this thing now to where it can kind of build. But like, I think there's a world out there where there's if the voting numbers get released, which I'm not too sure if they do that like publicly, but like after with MVP they'll show like, hey, like for hockey for example,
Right.
who voted for who, and like you'll see like, okay, Rick Zamperin fifth quarter, formerly CHC, like, which I don't agree with what happened, but that's just another story. Basically, he voted for him. Like
Hmm.
X reporter voted for X player. I just wonder about that. But one award I always want to talk about because I think who won last year should have won this year. That's Ryan Dinwiddie for Coach of the Year.
Hmm.
I look 16-2 is impressive, but I think what he did this year was a better coaching job overall than last year, considering the expectations going into the season.
Yeah, we always seem to honor, if you will, the best coach a year after the fact, or maybe even a year before that exceptional year has happened. Listen, I think he's a fantastic coach. I think Mike O'Shea's a great coach. Even last year, Jason Moss, that run that he had was epic. Corey Mace had a fantastic year this year. I voted for Moss this year, and this is why I did so. Is that here's a team that coming off a Grey Cup and the first one in a long time after getting red hot in the second half of the year. I thought he did not allow this team to have a Grey Cup hangover. And they were the best team in the first 12, 13 weeks of the season, and certainly record wise, the best team in the league. They're not in the Grey Cup because they didn't win the biggest game of the year, that being last week's East Final. But I think Moss did a really good job. And let's not forget, Fajardo went down with injury. They had a number of other injuries to some personnel. So I thought he did a good job of managing, the situation. But certainly Ryan Dinwiddie with, QB number one gone for 9 games because of what happened in the offseason. That is a steep hill to climb up from game number one. And
Yep.
he managed to rally the troops and, formulate a game plan. And it started with Dukes and, it continued a little bit with Arbuckle at one point. And then Kelly comes back and they kind of catch fire down the stretch. I think Dinwiddie should have been in the mix as well. Unfortunately, Jason Moss is on the team with one of the best defenses and again had some challenges that he had to overcome and the team with the best record, and that's almost automatic that you get into the equation.
So I think it's different because obviously the way that CFL awards it compared to NFL, like where CFL it's the best job coaching. Meanwhile, with NFL it's the coach that caught us the most off guard.
Yeah.
That's where I look at it, just because when it's like, which in that opinion Corey Mace would do it, but you're 1,000% right about Moss. Like the fact that, and I've seen this from him. I see their post game stuff all the time online. He doesn't let them get complacent. He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't let them do that. Even his speech Sunday, where it was so much different than last year. Last year, so last year's my first year with the team, and that was my first loss in person that I covered the East Final. And I'll be honest with you, as a young reporter, I was just scared to go in there because I'm like, I don't know what to ask. I don't want to piss them off.
Right.
But with Moss this year, it was, you know what, guys, it sucks. We had a hell of a year. We'll be back next year. And that's the kind of leadership that you need. You've seen that from Moss. You've seen that from Dinwiddie. You've seen that from O'Shea. You've seen that too from Corey Mace as well, who's really carving his own path out west, which I love Rough Rider fans, but they quickly went from loving him to hating him in in the blink of an eye, where the honeymoon phase ended. They lost. They didn't get a win, I think, for 7 weeks?
7 games. Yeah.
7 games, to where it's that quick realization of, hey, this isn't so easy, to really then respond, win down the stretch, beat BC the way they did. You can make a case for either one, but like I said, it's Moss winning that award because of the job he did. The one thing that's going to be interesting though with coaches for next year is that overall, because this has been said before in the NFL, but the mountain of 0-0. How do you climb it? And with a lot of these teams, look, there's only one team where I really look at right now where they're under significant pressure to improve, and that's Calgary. But besides that, a lot of teams are just looking to carve their own path and just see, how do we end up playing in a Grey Cup where it's -20 out?
Yeah, and you mentioned Calgary. I think Dave Dickinson has a big mountain to climb. I think that they're officially in rebuild mode. I know they're going to try and do it as quickly as possible. I don't think they have the pieces in place to do it unless, come free agency, they hit a home run with not one or two, but three or four different guys.
Yeah.
They all come together. They play great defense, and their offense is way, way better. They need a lot of help in Calgary. But listen, they had a tremendous run of 20, 25 years of being either in the playoffs or in the championship game or in the West Final, winning a lot of games. They had a fantastic run, and now it's their turn to be at the bottom of the standings. As we know, the Canadian Football League and any professional sports league is cyclical. You'll have some great years and some great campaigns, and then it's your time to kind of struggle.
Yeah, exactly. You always have like that 5-6 year window to really perform, and you have to win championships and do that. That's why I say there's a lot of pressure on Winnipeg to perform because that window is not starting to close, but like you can kind of start to see the end of the tunnel with them.
Mm-hmm.
I say that what I said about Calgary too, because him firing 3 positional coaches kind of shows that, hey, the pressure's on Dave this year to get better. I remember speaking to fans last year and they still weren't sold on Mayer. This is 2023. I don't know if they're sold on him now. Matthew Schultz is there as well. I know from Hamilton, but by way of Texas. But you have, when I look at next year's season, you have a Winnipeg team that surely who knows what's going to happen, but they'll still be away. It's one of those things where you can't just forget about them. You can't. It's like what we've seen from years from the Penguins in baseball, the Cardinals, the Penguins in hockey, and St. Louis Cardinals in baseball for years, where they'll find a way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Saskatchewan's there. BC, look, there's a lot of questions to be answered with them. That's just a very unfortunate situation, but there. And then the East, you honestly have 4 teams next year in the East that have a compelling case to where every game, it not must win, but a couple losses here or there could really kill your season.
Well, as we saw with the Ticats this year, they win one of those Saskatchewan games. They don't lose to Ottawa in the last minute where, they gave the Red Blacks too much time and they came and, scored the game-winning points. There's so many games that I think every team really can look back on and think, man, we should have won that game if we just did this, that, or the other thing. Easier said than done. You got to do it in the moment. But I think both divisions are really compelling. I think Calgary's probably going to be the one team on the outside looking indefinitely next year. Edmonton's going to be intriguing. They have a new head honcho who's trying to get his front office in line. Does Jarius Jackson come back? Are they going to be as good as they were in the second half all season long next year? That's going to be interesting to see. They have some holes to fill, like any team would in the offseason, but it'll be interesting to see how they fill those holes.
Exactly. And then the only other thing I want to say with Calgary right now is, look, I watched the announcement Friday. The city looks like they can put on a good event. It's really hard for me to stomach the fact that it's such an older stadium that needs a lot of work that, sorry, my screen went from Chrome to Safari. I don't know what happened there, but basically it's a stadium where I heard you say this on Chris's show and I completely agreed with you, but how do you convince someone, hey, you're going to sit on a cold metal bleacher and you're going to spend $500. Meanwhile, you're doing it Sunday, but Sunday you're not in the elements. That's the big sell on me for a lot of these CFL fans.
Well, absolutely. And you look at Calgary, which has, let's face it, the worst facility in the CFL. And, I'm just calling it a spade a spade. Here's a stadium that was built in 1960. It's well past its best before date. From an amenity standpoint, it can't hold a candle to places like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and Hamilton and BC and Toronto. I mean, you name it, every other facility, aside from Percival Molson Stadium in Montreal, which is also very long in the tooth, every other facility in the CFL can host a Grey Cup. And nary a fan would complain because they got a great seat, a great sight line, lots of hotel rooms, especially in the major centers. And Hamilton has done some amazing work in getting a lot more hotel rooms compared to what they had in the past. Calgary's got some work to do with their facility. They're getting a new hockey arena at some point down the line in the next 10 years, let's say. They need a new venue for the Stampeders.
The one thing I would say too with that is just like I saw them, they're getting turf, but even if you do a McMahon Stadium the next offseason, tear up the seats, put new seats in. There's something that's got to get done. And also to the in the tooth. Yeah, I got to go back to the time frame of that, but that's probably gonna be the title of the show because I always like look for little keywords there. But that's the one thing I look at for Calgary, where it's like some work has to be done, just because it's like you also too. They hosted less than 10 years ago. That's the other thing as well. Where the East, you have Montreal, I would love, but look, Olympic Stadium, I heard is out of commission for at least the next 4 or 5 years. But in Toronto too, look, there's something a little more important happening there in 2026. But I can see a world where 2027, Toronto's knocking at the door to host. 2028, it's Ottawa. 2029, they go back to Tim Hortons Field. Because for as much as the West is great, the hospitality is great, it's all fun. You need a home for this because the CFL, look, it's not. Because here's the thing I say for everyone out there comparing it. Obviously, like the Super Bowl is like on another level, but the thing about the Grey Cup, that in my opinion, that makes it so special, wasn't even the game itself last year. It was going to the convention center and seeing fans of every single team interacting with each
Mm.
other. It gave me a real last day of school vibe where it's like, everyone's come together to celebrate the game they love and watch a team hoist a trophy.
Yeah, I will say this: the Hamilton Grey Cup Festival Committee knocked it out of the park last year. It was a
1000%.
phenomenal festival. The setup was great, easy to get to. The weather one day didn't participate, but any other day was amazing. The awards in Niagara Falls, tip of the cap. That was a great idea. It really made it a regional kind of, showcase game. And, it's the fabric of this country. If you're a football fan in Canada and you like three down football, you're watching on Sunday, you probably got a rooting interest. If not, you're picking a team to root for. You're excited for the halftime show. All the glitz and glamour and the hoopla that goes with Grey Cup Sunday is awesome to watch. I'm just hoping for a good game. Like any championship game, you don't want to see a blowout. You don't want to see a team, not perform. Fingers crossed that both teams come to the table and they're ready to go.
Exactly. That's just it. You want to see that. Well, the only thing I'll say about Hamilton for next time, get a zip line. You know what? As we wrap up here, I just want to ask you quickly to do something for me, and that is for anyone out there who wants to follow you, for anyone in Tiger Town that might be listening, if they don't already know, where can they find you on socials and online?
Yeah, for socials, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, Facebook, X, the handle is at Rick Zamperin. And for lots of great Ticats and CFL content, the fifth quarter show on YouTube. It's live after every Ticats game, whether it's road or at home. I'll be live after the Grey Cup this Sunday talking about the big game. And then there's content throughout the week as well. Tuesdays, actually this coming Tuesday, we're going to launch a new feature called Seasons, looking back at some of the iconic seasons in Hamilton Tiger Cats history. And there's a lot of them to choose from. And every Thursday, we're going to focus on the legends, the legendary players, coaches, front office personnel that the Ticats have employed over the years. It's going to be a lot of fun doing a lot of this research and just seeing fans' reactions about this. And we're also going to have a free agency show on November the 22nd as well. It's a Friday, 8 p.m. We're going to talk about who the players that the Tiger Cats should keep, who they should get rid of, what free agents they should target. Going to be a lot of fun on November 22nd.
It all sounds like a whole boatload of fun because before you know it, we'll have to snap our fingers and it'll be us probably at the University of Guelph watching the Ticats play the Argos, which if both organizations, I got to say this right now, that's the game that Argos should host as their preseason game every year because it's a bit of a drive for Argos fans, but for Ticats fans, it's a quick drive up Highway 6.
Yeah.
And for me too, it's only a 20-minute drive because I'm based out of Waterloo, but that's neither here nor there. Now
it does give us bad memories of 2013, though. I mean, good and bad memories, but yeah, that's a phenomenal idea. Ticats, Argos, Guelph every year, preseason game number 1 or 2. Let's make it happen.
So when we'll talk about it a little bit after as well, but I was shocked last year when I pull up and I was trying to find parking at the university and I see people tailgating, people hanging out, all stuff. I'm like, okay, I did not expect this many people to be at this game just because you don't know with preseason football, but then it's just shows that, hey, CFL fans love CFL.
Absolutely. And it's a great party in Guelph, great university town. It's an awesome stadium and easy to get to as well. So yeah.
And also great namesake though, too, for me as well. Home to the Griffins. But anyway, folks, that's going to do it. Episode 326 in the bag. Enjoy the Grey Cup Sunday, Rick. It was a blast getting to talk to you. You'll have to do it again sometime soon. But for Rick Zamperin, I'm Griff. Enjoy the Grey Cup, everyone.